Get this gutter rat away from my table before his stench ruins the caviar or he decides to steal my watch. Hale Grey said it like a man who'd never been told no. 9:47 p.m. on a Thursday in September, 68 degrees, the Opal Terrace patio, string lights casting amber pools across Italian marble, gas heaters humming against the evening cool. Grey in his custom $12,000 wheelchair, gold accents gleaming. 8 dinner guests in tailored suits shifted uncomfortably, crystal champagne flutes catching light. Henry Street stood 4 feet away, 9 years old, homeless, barefoot, soot-stained flat cap pulled low, jacket 3 sizes too large, torn at the shoulder from climbing a dumpster fence, one black face in a sea of white privilege. "Sir, please," Henry's voice barely carried, "I can help your legs." Grey's laughter cut through the night, sharp, cruel. "How long would this street magic take, boy?" Henry's hands trembled. "Seconds. The journal said seconds." The patio erupted. Men in $3,000 suits doubled over. Women in designer dresses turned away embarrassed by the spectacle. Grey pulled a gold-plated pen from his breast pocket, still laughing so hard tears streaked his face. He flipped open an embossed leather checkbook. "Perfect, absolutely perfect. Heal me for $2 million in your magical seconds, gutter rat. When you fail, and you will fail, the police take you to juvenile detention. You'll be eating prison food by midnight." Henry whispered, "Deal." Before we dive into Henry's incredible journey, welcome to Midnight Plot Stories, where we bring you the most gripping, emotional, and unforgettable tales that will keep you hooked until the very last word. If you're new here, you've just stumbled onto something special. We craft stories that challenge everything you think you know about courage, redemption, and the power of the human spirit. Here's what I need you to do right now. Hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next, not just in this story, but in every story we release. Smash the like button if you're already invested in Henry's journey. Your support tells us you want more stories like this. Share this with someone who needs to hear a story about an underdog who refused to stay down. Someone who needs to remember that brilliance doesn't care about zip codes or bank accounts. And drop a comment below telling us, have you ever been underestimated? What did you do to prove them wrong? Now let's get back to Henry Street, because what you just witnessed was only the beginning. The real story, the one that will change everything, starts 30 minutes earlier in the shadows behind the Opal Terrace, where a 9-year-old boy was about to find the knowledge that would challenge a billionaire's entire worldview. Let's continue. 30 minutes earlier, 9:17 p.m. Henry had followed the smell 8 blocks from the University Hospital dumpsters. Truffle oil, seared duck, aged wine, food from a universe he'd only read about in the society pages people threw away. September air was kind to bare feet. 68 degrees wouldn't kill him, not yet. December would be different. December would demand choices he wasn't ready to make. The Opal Terrace rose like a temple. White stone columns, ivy crawling up brick, warm golden light flooding from floor-to-ceiling windows. Inside sat people who'd never missed a meal, never slept cold, never been invisible. Henry found the service gate, the dumpsters, and beside them a recycling cart where someone had tossed medical reading material. 4 pristine copies of Neurosurgery Quarterly, Spring 2024 issue, coffee-stained, water-damaged at the corners, some doctor's discarded subscription. To Henry, they were a lottery ticket. He spread the pages on concrete beside the decorative boxwoods that separated the service area from the outdoor dining patio. 6 feet away, through gaps in manicured greenery, he could see everything. 15 tables under vintage Edison bulbs, gas heaters glowing orange, the kind that cost more than his mother's entire medical bill, when she'd had medical care, when she'd been alive. Henry found half a bread roll in the dumpster's top layer, ate it slowly while reading by borrowed light from the patio. Article title: Acute Sciatic Nerve Entrapment Secondary to Piriformis Syndrome, Emergency Release Protocol. His eyes moved across the page once. That's all it took. Photographic memory. Discovered at age 7 during a free clinic screening. Extraordinary, the neurologist had said, eyes wide. That was before extraordinary stopped opening doors. Before his mother died waiting in an emergency room. Before extraordinary became just another word for unwanted. The text burned into his brain like a photograph. Perfect, permanent, indelible. Acute piriformis syndrome causing sciatic compression presents as sudden onset lower extremity paralysis with excruciating pain. Emergency manual release protocol. Identify piriformis trigger point 2 centimeters inferior and 3 centimeters lateral to greater trochanter. Patient in lateral recumbent position. Sustained deep tissue pressure at 45-degree angle. Force 8 to 12 pounds. Duration 15 to 30 seconds. Muscle relaxation and immediate nerve decompression. Mobility restoration is instantaneous. Henry mouthed the protocol silently, adding it to his mental archive. 43 stolen pages before this. 44 now. His entire medical education stored in a plastic Ziploc bag and a brain that never forgot anything. On the patio, celebration exploded. A toast, champagne corks, then a scream. Hale Grey's scream, raw, animal, the kind of pain that strips away every layer of civilization and leaves only terror. Henry looked through the boxwood. Grey had collapsed forward in his wheelchair, both hands clawing at his left leg, face twisted in agony. His champagne glass shattered on marble. Guests backed away. Someone in pearls started crying. And Henry remembered. His mother, clutching her chest, gasping, waiting. 3 hours in an emergency room, while doctors walked past, while nurses said soon, while soon turned into too late. Henry stood, walked through the gap in the hedges, stepped onto the opal terrace patio, and said 5 words that would change everything. I know what's happening. Grey's face snapped toward Henry through a haze of pain. Their eyes locked. Billionaire and street child, wheelchair and bare feet, rage and certainty. And in that moment, with $2 million and a prison cell hanging in the balance, Henry Street reached into his jacket and pulled out the one thing he owned, a torn photograph of his mother and a stolen journal entry that said he could do the impossible. The countdown was about to begin. Henry's fingers found the photograph before his mind could stop them. It lived in the inner band of his flat cap, folded twice, protected by a square of plastic bag he'd heat-sealed with a stolen lighter, the only possession that mattered. He unfolded it now. 9:19 p.m. Sitting behind the boxwoods with a neurosurgery journal on his lap. The patio light caught the image just right. His mother, 28 years old in the photo, wearing hospital scrubs, the green kind that meant surgical unit. Her smile was the kind that reached her eyes, real, unguarded, taken on her first day at County General, before the double shifts, before the exhaustion, before the chest pain she'd ignored for 3 months because she couldn't afford to miss work. Henry traced the torn edge where his father used to be. Gone now. Not dead. Worse. Chose to leave. Chose a life that didn't include a struggling woman in her too smart son. You're going to be a doctor, baby. She'd said it 100 times, 1,000, usually at night when her shift ended and she'd come home smelling like antiseptic and exhaustion. She'd sit on the edge of their mattress, the only furniture in their studio apartment, and run her fingers through his hair. You've got a gift, Henry. That brain of yours, it's special. You read something once and it's yours forever. That's not normal, baby. That's not even rare. That's chosen. He'd believed her. At 7, at 8, at 9 years old, he'd believed every word. February 14th, 3:47 a.m. Henry woke to his mother gasping, hand pressed to her chest, eyes wide with something between pain and terror. Mama? I'm okay, baby. Just give me a minute. But she wasn't okay. Her lips had a blue tint even in the dark. Her breathing came in shallow, desperate pulls. Henry called 911 on their neighbor's phone. The ambulance took 11 minutes. It felt like hours. At the hospital, they waited. His mother in a plastic chair in the ER corridor. Henry beside her, holding her hand, feeling how cold it had become. Nurses walked past. Doctors walked past. Everyone walked past. Soon, they kept saying. Soon. Soon never came. She died at 6:23 a.m. in a hallway chair, surrounded by people who could have saved her, who had the knowledge, the tools, the power to make her heart keep beating. But she was uninsured. She was poor. She was invisible. So she died. Henry folded the photograph back into its plastic square, back into his cap, back into the place closest to his thoughts. On the patio, Hale Grey was laughing, toasting, celebrating whatever men with $12,000 wheelchairs celebrate. Henry's hands shook as he closed the neurosurgery journal. His mother had died because people with knowledge chose not to use it, because her life didn't matter enough, because she couldn't pay. But Henry had knowledge now. 44 neurosurgery journal articles, hundreds of pages, procedures and protocols in anatomical precision burned into his perfect memory. And tonight, someone was going to see him. Tonight, someone was going to understand that knowledge didn't belong to the wealthy. It belonged to anyone brave enough to claim it. Even a barefoot 9-year-old in a torn jacket. Even a boy the world decided didn't matter. He stood, brushed the dirt from his knees, and walked toward the celebration. Toward the scream that would change everything. Henry stepped through the gap in the boxwoods at 9:21 p.m. The opal terrace spread before him like a painting he'd only seen in magazine pages pulled from trash bins. 15 tables arranged in a semicircle around a central fountain, water catching light, throwing diamonds across white marble, the air thick with butter and wine and money. He moved along the edge, shadow to shadow, invisible the way homeless children learn to be invisible. His bare feet made no sound on the stone. His torn jacket blended with the night between the gas heater's glow. The serving station sat tucked behind a decorative trellis heavy with jasmine. Henry could see it from his position near the hedges. 3 plates waiting to be cleared, one with most of a steak still on it, another with roasted vegetables untouched. Rich people wasted more food in an evening than Henry saw in a week. He just needed to wait. Waiters would bring the plates to the service area. He'd take what he could carry, disappear before anyone noticed the hungry ghost at their celebration. But then, the scream happened. Hale Grey's voice cut through champagne laughter and string quartet music, raw, primal, the kind of sound that makes everyone freeze because human beings are wired to recognize agony. Henry turned. Grey had lurched forward in his wheelchair, both hands clawing at his left leg, his face twisted into something barely human, mouth open, eyes wild, sweat already beading on his forehead despite the cool evening air. The guests scattered like birds. Someone knocked over a champagne bottle, crystal shattered. A woman in a silver dress backed into a gas heater and yelped. A man in a navy suit shouted for someone to call 911. Another yelled for a doctor. Chaos blooming in the space where order had been seconds before. Henry watched Grey's hands, the way they pressed into his lower back, the way his left leg had gone rigid, the way his foot twisted inward at an unnatural angle, the way his spine curved as if trying to escape his own body. And Henry knew. He'd read those exact symptoms 17 minutes ago, page 4 of the neurosurgery journal. Clinical presentation, acute onset, lower extremity paralysis, excruciating pain radiating from gluteal region down posterior leg, patient unable to bear weight, muscle locked in protective spasm, piriformis syndrome, sciatic nerve entrapment, the kind of medical emergency that looked like a stroke but wasn't, the kind that sent people to hospitals for CT scans and MRIs and hours of tests, while the real problem was a muscle crushing a nerve, the kind that could be fixed in seconds if you knew where to press. Henry's legs moved before his brain caught up. 3 steps forward, out of the shadows, into the light of the gas heaters and string bulbs and the shocked faces of people who'd never expected to see a child like him in a place like this. A security guard materialized, hand on Henry's shoulder. Kid, you need to— I know what's wrong with him. Henry's voice came out stronger than he felt, steady, clear. The voice his mother used when talking to doctors who tried to dismiss her. I can help. The guard's grip tightened. You need to leave before— Let the boy speak. It was Hale Grey, through gritted teeth, through pain that made his words shake. But his eyes had found Henry, sharp, assessing, the eyes of a man who'd built an empire by reading people. Henry met that gaze, held it. I know what's happening to you, and I know how to fix it. The patio went silent. Even the fountain seemed to quiet. 15 tables of wealth and privilege holding their breath, watching a barefoot child in a torn jacket face down a billionaire in a $12,000 wheelchair. And then Hale Grey laughed.
Grey's laughter died in his throat, replaced by another wave of pain that bent him double. His knuckles went white, gripping the wheelchair arms. A vein pulsed in his temple. He sucked air through his teeth in sharp, desperate gasps. "Someone do something!" A woman's voice, high, panicked. "Where's the ambulance?" 8 minutes out, someone else answered. "They said 8 minutes." 8 minutes. Henry looked at Grey's leg, the way it trembled, the way the muscle had locked so tight it looked carved from stone. 8 minutes might as well be 8 hours. "Sir," Henry stepped closer, the security guard's hand still on his shoulder, but looser now, uncertain. "It's not a stroke. It's not your spine. It's your piriformis muscle compressing your sciatic nerve." Silence, the kind that happens when a child speaks words adults don't expect to hear. A man in a charcoal suit laughed nervously. The kid's been watching too much TV. But Grey's eyes had sharpened, fixed on Henry with an intensity that cut through the pain. "What did you just say?" Henry's heart hammered against his ribs. His mouth had gone dry, but he'd memorized the text. Every word, every phrase, every detail burned into his brain like a photograph he could read whenever he closed his eyes. Acute piriformis syndrome. The Latin rolled off his tongue the way the journal had written it, precise, clinical. Musculus piriformis in sustained contracture causing compression of the nervus ischiaticus, the sciatic nerve. It's being crushed by your own muscle. That's why your leg won't move. That's why the pain radiates from your gluteal region down the posterior aspect of your lower extremity. The patio had gone completely still. No one moved, no one spoke. 15 tables of wealth and education staring at a 9-year-old barefoot boy speaking medical Latin like he'd been born in a teaching hospital. A man in charcoal suit laughed nervously. "This is insane. He's a child. He doesn't—" "Diagnosis," Grey cut him off. His face was pale, sweat running down his jaw, but his eyes never left Henry. "You've given me a diagnosis. What about treatment?" Henry met his gaze. Emergency manual release protocol. Sustained deep tissue pressure at the trigger point. 8 to 12 pounds of force at a 45-degree angle. Duration 15 to 30 seconds. He paused. "The journal said mobility restoration is instantaneous." Instantaneous. Grey laughed again, but this time it wasn't mockery. It was something darker, something that sounded like desperation wrapped in disbelief. "You're telling me you can fix in seconds what 3 specialists and 6 months of physical therapy couldn't?" "Yes, sir." "By pressing on a muscle?" "Yes, sir." Grey reached into his jacket, pulled out the gold-plated pen, the embossed checkbook. His hand shook as he opened it, as he began to write, the scratch of pen on paper loud in the silence. "Then let's make this interesting," Grey said. "Let's see if your miraculous stolen knowledge is worth anything in the real world." Grey's laughter died in his throat, replaced by another wave of pain that bent him double. His knuckles went white, gripping the wheelchair arms. A vein pulsed in his temple. He sucked air through his teeth in sharp, desperate gasps. "Someone do something!" A woman's voice, high, panicked. "Where's the ambulance?" 8 minutes out, someone else answered. "They said 8 minutes." 8 minutes. Henry looked at Grey's leg, the way it trembled, the way the muscle had locked so tight it looked carved from stone. 8 minutes might as well be 8 hours. "Sir," Henry stepped closer, the security guard's hand still on his shoulder, but looser now, uncertain. "It's not a stroke. It's not your spine. It's your piriformis muscle compressing your sciatic nerve." Silence.
the kind that happens when a child speaks words adults don't expect to hear. A man in a charcoal suit laughed nervously. The kid's been watching too much TV. But Gray's eyes had sharpened, fixed on Henry with an intensity that cut through the pain. "What did you just say?" Henry's heart hammered against his ribs. His mouth had gone dry. But he'd memorized the text. Every word, every phrase, every detail burned into his brain like a photograph he could read whenever he closed his eyes. Acute piriformis syndrome. The Latin rolled off his tongue the way the journal had written it. Precise, clinical. Musculus piriformis in sustained contracture, causing compression of the nervus ischiaticus, the sciatic nerve. It's being crushed by your own muscle. That's why your leg won't move. That's why the pain radiates from your gluteal region down the posterior aspect of your lower extremity. The patio had gone completely still. No one moved. No one spoke. 15 tables of wealth and education staring at a 9-year-old barefoot boy speaking medical Latin like he'd been born in a teaching hospital. A man in gray temples shook his head. "This is insane. He's a child. He doesn't—" "Diagnosis," Gray cut him off. His face was pale, sweat running down his jaw, but his eyes never left Henry. "You've given me a diagnosis. What about treatment?" Henry met his gaze. "Emergency manual release protocol. Sustained deep tissue pressure at the trigger point, 8 to 12 pounds of force at a 45-degree angle, duration 15 to 30 seconds. He paused. "The journal said mobility restoration is instantaneous." "Instantaneous?" Gray laughed again. But this time it wasn't mockery. It was something darker, something that sounded like desperation wrapped in disbelief. "You're telling me you can fix in seconds what 3 specialists in 6 months of physical therapy couldn't?" "Yes, sir." "By pressing on a muscle?" "Yes, sir." Gray reached into his jacket, pulled out the gold-plated pen, the embossed checkbook. His hands shook as he opened it, as he began to write, the scratch of pen on paper loud in the silence. "Then let's make this interesting. Let's see if your miraculous stolen knowledge is worth anything in the real world."
Henry walked to the nearest table, his bare feet silent against marble that probably cost more per square foot than his mother's entire monthly rent. The guests at the table jerked back like he carried disease. One woman actually clutched her purse to her chest. He reached for a bottle sitting in an ice bucket. San Pellegrino, the green glass frosted with condensation. The kind of water that cost more than tap water had any right to cost. The kind his mother used to joke about when they passed the fancy grocery stores. "Imagine paying $6 to be thirsty," she'd say. Henry unscrewed the cap, poured the sparkling water over his hands, let it cascade over his fingers, his palms, between his knuckles, washing away the dirt of the dumpster, the grime of the streets, the evidence of survival that these people found so offensive. The water was cold, clean. It fizzed against his skin. He scrubbed methodically, the way he'd seen in a medical textbook photograph titled Pre-Surgical Hygiene Protocol. Fingers interlaced, rotating his wrists, making sure every surface was covered. The water ran gray at first, then clearer, then crystal. "Is he serious right now?" A man's voice, incredulous. "He's washing his hands with $40 water," someone else whispered. "Someone should stop this before—" "Let him finish." Gray's voice cut through the murmurs, still tight with pain, still edged with mockery. "Let the little doctor prepare his instruments." Henry used a second bottle, then a third, making sure, being thorough. Because if he was going to do this, if he was actually going to put his hands on a man worth more than every person Henry had ever known combined, he was going to do it right, the way the journals said, the way his mother would have wanted. He set down the empty bottle, shook his hands dry, the evening air cool against wet skin. "Mr. Gray," Henry said, "I need you on the ground." "Excuse me?" "On the ground, on your left side. The journal said the protocol requires lateral recumbent position. You have to be lying down." Gray stared at him. For a moment, Henry thought he'd refuse, thought the humiliation of getting on the floor in front of his guests would be too much, even for $2 million of theater. But then Gray's face twisted with another wave of pain. His breath hissed through clenched teeth. His left hand clawed at his lower back like he could dig the agony out through skin and muscle.
Fine. Grey gripped the wheelchair arms. Someone help me. Two men in suits stepped forward, lifted Grey with the careful movements of people afraid of breaking something valuable. They lowered him to the marble patio floor, positioned him on his left side the way Henry directed. His expensive slacks scraped against stone, his custom shirt untucked, his carefully maintained image reduced to a man writhing on the ground while a child gave orders. Henry knelt beside him, his knees against cold marble, his clean hands hovering over Grey's hip. He could feel everyone watching, could feel the weight of 15 tables of judgment and disbelief and schadenfreude. He closed his eyes, let the journal entry play in his mind, every word, every detail. The anatomical diagram showing exactly where the piriformis muscle lived, exactly where the sciatic nerve ran, exactly where pressure needed to be applied. 2 centimeters inferior and 3 centimeters lateral to the greater trochanter, 45-degree angle, 8 to 12 pounds of sustained pressure, 15 to 30 seconds. He could do this. He had to do this. Henry opened his eyes, placed his hands on Hale Grey's hip, and began.
Henry's fingers found the landmark first, the greater trochanter, the bony prominence at the top of Grey's femur. He'd seen it in anatomical drawings, felt it now through expensive fabric and wealthy flesh. Real, solid, exactly where the textbook said it would be. 2 centimeters down, 3 centimeters out. His thumb pressed into the soft tissue, searching, feeling for the resistance that meant muscle. The piriformis lived deep, hidden beneath the gluteus maximus, a small muscle with enormous power when it decided to betray the body it was meant to serve. Grey flinched. "What are you—" "Found it." Henry's voice came out steadier than he felt. His thumb had hit something dense, rigid, a band of muscle tight as steel cable. "Your piriformis, it's locked." He positioned his other hand for leverage, palms overlapping the way the journal diagram had shown. Pressure point isolated, 45-degree angle, his whole body weight ready to drive down through his small arms. "Wait!" A woman's voice, the one in pearls. Shouldn't we stop this?" "Too late now." Grey's words came through gritted teeth. "The boy made his bet. Let's see if his garbage education is worth anything." Henry took a breath, remembered his mother's hands, the way she held patients steady when they were scared, the way she'd made them feel safe even when everything hurt. "This is going to hurt more before it gets better," Henry said quietly. "But then it stops. The journal promised it stops." Grey laughed, bitter, sharp. The journal promised. Henry pressed down. 8 pounds of force, then 10, then 12, driving his thumbs deep into the muscle, finding the trigger point where nerve met spasm, where science met suffering. Grey screamed, not a gasp, not a groan, a full-throated scream that cut through the night and made half the guests turn away. "Someone start counting," a man's voice, mocking, theatrical. "Let's time this miracle." 1. Multiple voices now, a chorus, some laughing, some uncertain, all watching. Henry held pressure, steady, unrelenting. The muscle fought him, pushed back, refused to yield. 2. Sweat beaded on Henry's forehead. His arms shook. 12 pounds of force didn't sound like much until you had to sustain it with a 9-year-old's body weight, until you had to hold it while a man twice your size writhed beneath you. 3. Grey's hand shot out, grabbed Henry's wrist. "Stop! Stop it! You're making it worse." The journal said 15 seconds minimum. We're not even halfway. 4. The crowd's counting had taken on a rhythm, a cadence, some voices jeering, others genuinely curious, a few, maybe 2 or 3, actually hoping the impossible might happen. 5. Henry felt something shift, small, almost imperceptible, a microscopic give in the muscle fiber. 6. More movement, the steel cable starting to fray, the rigid band beginning to soften. 7. Grey's breathing changed, still ragged, still pained, but different,
like a man who sees light at the end of a tunnel he thought had no end. 8. I feel it. Something's changing. 9. The muscle released another fraction. Henry pressed harder, finding the exact angle, the precise pressure, everything the journal had described. 10. Oh, God! Gray's back arched. 11. Henry's arms burned, his thumbs ached, but he held like his life depended on it, because it did. 12. It's... Gray gasped. The pain, it's moving. 13. Another shift, bigger this time, the muscle giving way, like a door unlocking. 14. Almost there, Henry whispered. Just hold on. 15. And then it happened. A sound, physical, audible, like a thick rubber band snapping deep inside Gray's body. The muscle let go.
Silence. Not the absence of sound, but something deeper. The kind of quiet that happens when the world holds its breath, when reality shifts and everyone watching knows they've witnessed something that shouldn't be possible. Henry lifted his hands, slowly, his thumbs aching, his arms trembling. Gray lay perfectly still on the marble, eyes closed, chest rising and falling in slow, measured breaths. 16, someone whispered it, breaking the spell. 17. Sir? Henry's voice cracked. Mr. Gray? Gray's eyes opened, stared up at the string lights, at the stars beyond, at a sky he'd been too angry to notice before. 18. Gray's left leg moved. Not a tremor, not a spasm, a deliberate bend at the knee, smooth, controlled, the way legs were supposed to move before 6 months of paralysis had stolen that simple grace. A woman gasped. Gray rolled onto his back, then pushed himself up, sitting, his hands pressed against the cold marble, his expensive slacks torn at the knee, his shirt wrinkled and untucked, his carefully maintained image completely destroyed. But his leg was moving. Hale, the man with gray temples, voice shaking. Your leg. Gray didn't answer. He was staring at his left foot, rotating the ankle, flexing, pointing, testing movements he'd forgotten were possible. His face had gone white, not from pain this time, from something else, something that looked like fear and wonder and disbelief all tangled together. He placed both hands flat on the patio floor, pushed, lifted his hips, got his feet underneath him. The guest surged forward, hands reaching to steady him, to help him, to catch him when he inevitably fell. But Gray shrugged them off. Don't, his voice raw. Don't touch me. I need to know. He stood, fully upright, weight distributed evenly on both legs. No wheelchair, no support, no assistance. Just a man standing under string lights on a September evening while 15 tables of wealth and privilege watched in absolute silence. Gray took a step. His left foot lifted, moved forward, planted. His right foot followed, then his left again. Small steps, careful, like a child learning to walk, but steps nonetheless. Oh my God, a woman's voice barely audible. He's walking. 3 steps, 4, 5. Gray made it to his wheelchair, turned, looked back at the path he'd just traveled. 6 feet of marble that might as well have been 6 miles for what they represented. His hands gripped the wheelchair's handles, not for support, for proof, for evidence that the chair existed, that 6 months of imprisonment had actually happened and wasn't some nightmare he'd finally woken from. 6 months, Gray's voice broke. 6 months, 3 different specialists told me the damage was permanent, that I'd never walk without surgery, that the best I could hope for was pain management and physical therapy. He looked at Henry, really looked at him, saw past the torn jacket and bare feet and dirt that even $40 water couldn't completely wash away. You fixed it in 18 seconds. Henry still knelt on the marble, his hands clasped in front of him, his mother's photograph pressed between his palms. He couldn't speak, couldn't move, could only watch as the impossible unfolded in front of him. Grey walked back, each step stronger, more confident, the muscle memory returning, the body remembering what it meant to be whole. He stopped in front of Henry, towering over the small boy still kneeling on the ground. For a moment, no one moved, no one breathed. Then Grey knelt, slowly, carefully, bringing himself down to Henry's level, eye to eye, man to child, billionaire to street rat, all the hierarchies that seemed so solid 18 seconds ago, suddenly meaningless. "What's your name? Your full name?" "Henry David Street." "Henry David Street," Grey repeated it, not mocking this time, not cruel, like he was committing it to memory the way Henry committed everything to memory. "How old are you?" "9. 9 years old." Grey's jaw clenched, unclenched. "And you learned this from garbage." It wasn't question, but Henry answered anyway. "Yes, sir." Grey's hand moved to his jacket's pocket, pulled out the check, the $2 million prop, the joke that wasn't funny anymore. He looked at it for a long moment, at the zeros, at Henry's name written in ink that seemed so temporary 20 minutes ago. Then he pulled out the gold-plated pen. "This was supposed to be theater," Grey said quietly. "This was supposed to teach you a lesson about knowing your place." He signed the check. Real signature this time. Not mocking, not cruel. Just his name in bold strokes that meant the paper in his hand was worth more than most people earned in a lifetime. "Instead," Grey continued, "I think I'm the one who learned something." Grey held the check between them. $2 million. Henry's name. A signature that was now legally binding. The joke that had become a promise. "Take it," Grey said. Henry's hands shook as he reached out. The paper felt impossibly light for something that represented everything his mother had died hoping for, everything he'd stolen knowledge for, everything he'd risked juvenile detention to prove. "There's a condition," Grey continued, his voice still rough but different now, stripped of cruelty. "You don't spend this on anything stupid. You don't waste it. You use it the way your mother would have wanted." "Yes, sir." "And you let me help." Grey stood, pulled Henry up with him. "Not just money, connections, tutors, the kind of education that doesn't come from dumpsters." He paused, looked at the guests, still frozen in shock around them. "I want everyone here to remember this. Remember what you thought when you saw this boy, what you assumed, what you believed about where knowledge lives and who deserves access to it." His voice grew harder. "Remember that you were wrong." 9 years later, Henry David Street stood outside the entrance to Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, 21 years old, white coat ceremony in 3 hours. His acceptance letter tucked in the pocket where he used to keep his mother's photograph. The photograph now framed and sitting on his desk in the apartment Hale Grey's foundation had paid for. The scholarship covered everything: undergraduate at Yale, MCAT prep, medical school tuition, housing, books, everything his mother had dreamed of and more. But it wasn't just Henry. The Street Scholarship now supported 47 students, brilliant children pulled from foster care, homeless shelters, and forgotten corners of the system, kids who had photographic memories or extraordinary talents, or simply refused to let circumstances define their futures. Each one hand-picked, each one given the same chance Henry had received on a patio 9 years ago. Grey called them his investment. Henry called them his mother's legacy. His phone buzzed, a text from Grey. "Watching the live stream, your mother would be proud. Don't make me cry during your speech." Henry typed back, "You cried when I got accepted. You'll definitely cry during the speech." "Fair point. See you at graduation, Dr. Street." Not doctor yet, but soon. 3 hours from now, he'd stand on a stage and recite the oath. Promise to do no harm. Promise to serve with compassion. Promise to see patients as people, not problems. Promise to never let anyone die in a hallway because they couldn't pay. He looked at his reflection in the glass doors, still saw glimpses of the 9-year-old boy in a torn jacket, still felt the marble cold against his bare feet, still heard the counting. 1, 2, 3. Still remembered the moment a billionaire knelt before him and chose to see worth where society saw none. Henry pushed through the doors, into the building, into the life his mother had envisioned, into the life that started with 18 seconds of pressure on a nerve and ended with a foundation that would outlive them all. The Street Scholarship, named for a boy who had nothing, built by a man who learned that everything he had meant nothing if he couldn't share it with those who needed it most. Henry's white coat waited inside, freshly pressed, his name embroidered on the chest. Henry David Street, M.D. He'd earned every letter.
So there you have it. Henry Street went from a barefoot boy scavenging medical journals and dumpsters to Dr. Henry David Street, saving lives in the very hospitals that once turned his mother away. But here's the uncomfortable truth I need you to sit with for a moment. You just spent the last 40 minutes watching Henry's story. You felt something when Grey mocked him. You held your breath during that 18-second countdown. You maybe even teared up when you realized Henry would become the doctor his mother always knew he could be. But if you don't subscribe, if you don't hit that like button, if you don't share this story, it dies here. See, Henry fought against a system that told him he was invisible, that his brilliance didn't matter because of where he came from. And he won because one person, just one person, finally chose to see him. Right now, you have the power to be that one person for this channel. Every story we created, Midnight Plot Stories, is crafted with the same care, the same emotional depth, the same commitment to making you feel something real in a world that's increasingly numb. But YouTube's algorithm, it doesn't care about quality. It cares about numbers, subscribers, likes, shares, comments. That's how stories like Henry's reach people who desperately need to hear them. So here's what I'm asking. No, here's what I'm begging you to do. Subscribe to Midnight Plot Stories, because if you loved this story, we have dozens more that will absolutely wreck you, in the best way. Hit the like button. It takes half a second and tells YouTube that this story matters, that stories about underdogs and redemption and impossible victories deserve to be seen. Share this video. Think about someone in your life who's been counted out, who's been told they're not enough, who needs to remember that brilliance can come from anywhere. Send this to them. Tag them, make them watch it. Comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Are you in New York, Lagos, Mumbai, Tokyo, London? Let us know. Let's build a global community of people who believe that stories have the power to change hearts. And here's the guilt trip I promised. If you watched this entire story, if you felt Henry's struggle, if you celebrated his victory, and you scroll past without subscribing, you're doing to this channel exactly what those wealthy guests did to Henry. You're looking at something valuable and choosing to walk away because engaging costs you something, even if that something is just 3 seconds of your time. Don't be like them. Be like Henry. Be like the version of Hale Grey who chose to see worth where others saw nothing. Subscribe, like, share, comment. Do it now while you're still feeling the story, because if you wait, you'll forget. In this story, this channel will disappear into the algorithm like Henry almost disappeared into the system. Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments right now. Let's see how far Henry's story has traveled. Thank you for being here. Thank you for caring. And if you subscribed, liked, and shared, thank you for being the kind of person who makes sure brilliant stories don't die in the darkness. Now go. There are more stories waiting for you. Stories about people who refuse to accept the world's verdict on their worth. Stories that will remind you why you're still fighting. See you in the next one. Midnight Plot Stories, where every story matters, especially yours.